Okay, well, I'm Carl Farinelli. This is Matt Farinelli, and father and son. So if you can't recognize that we favor each other, and I'm Mark Lamar. But we're going to take you around the United States and through history. I was loading up, and I noticed that I did not bring my hand drum. Well, you know what? When you have a banjo, you always have a drum, don't you? The sound, the body on a banjo is actually made from a hand drum, with strings stretched across it. And gourd drums and gourd banjos originally had the very same instrument. So one of the oldest instruments in American music would be those of the Native Americans. And so the drum would have been a gourd or a piece of log with a hide usually. And I have a deer hide drum, but I didn't bring it today. So you'll just have to imagine this as deer hide and a piece of a log. And so the drum is a neat instrument, and there's so many wonderful stories. Some tribes thought that the drum actually was a living being and that it had its own soul. And so they would treat it like a person, like a grandfather, or like a member of the family. And so you have to understand Native American spirituality, and you have to also understand that there were as diverse different types of tribes as there are any other kind of people in the world. Just like, you can't say all Anglo-Saxon people are the same. Well, you can't say all the tribes are the same. Some were matricentric, meaning they were kind of governed by the wisdom of the women. Some were patricentric or patricentric, meaning they were ruled by men like the European tribes were. And the Cherokee was a matricentric or matricentric culture. And the Cherokee are the ones who established this university. So anybody know, have y'all studied anything about matricentric versus patricentric societies? Okay, matricentric meaning mother-centered means that there's more of a feminine wisdom, and this being the month of the woman. Who knew that? Okay, this is the month of the woman. So I hope that you'll take time to read some great American literature like Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Gardens or something like that that talks about feminine wisdom. And so the drum is one of those great pieces of instrumentation that lays down the rhythm of any band, but it also matches the heartbeat, it matches natural rhythms that you hear in nature. And so we used to have a Kiowa drummer and storyteller by the name of Jake Sinead. He was our Director of Veterans Affairs. He used to come visit my class, the American Song and Literature. And one of the things he would do is he would play this little beat. And so you'll probably recognize this, see if you recognize this beat. So when you hear that beat, what do you think of? What is that? Oh, you were right. So from a Native American standpoint, does anybody have any idea what tribe that beat was played by? Did you ever hear it on any? Well, Jake Sinead would play that. He would say, "What tribe do you think that is?" And people would guess. And then he would finally say, "Well, it was only played by the Hollywood tribe." In other words, it was only done in movies. There was no Native American tribe that used that beat. That was a European idea of a beat being applied to Native Americans, and it's usually played in movies when they have Native Americans, dancing around a fire or such. They'll usually play that hard beat followed by 3 soft beats. So Jake Sinead would tell a story. I'm going to try to do the very quick version of it. And he would say, here's why. He said that most Native American tribes had drums, but almost all of them only used hard beats, not for meter, not for marching, or not for dancing. They only used hard beats as spiritual messages. They called them honor beats. And when they felt the presence of a warrior, a dead warrior, or a grandmother or grandfather, the drum leader would hit that hard beat to say a sacred hello. And he said, so Native Americans would never use a hard beat just for meter. That's a European idea, to use a hard beat just for meter. To make, if you're doing a walk, if you're doing a march, boom, 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 let's march to war, boom, 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 because 2-4, 2 feet, right? That's a march beat. So most John Philip Sousa marches are boom, boom, boom. Polkas are boom, 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 right? If you're doing a waltz, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So European music is based on using heartbeats to measure the meter. If you're doing rock and roll, it's so beat has to do with meter in European music. But for Native Americans, a heartbeat is an honor beat. And it's like saying a sacred, according to Jake Sinead, it was like a sacred hello. And you would never use something sacred for something as profane as just marking time. It was used for spiritual messages, to say hello to a grandmother. So if you're, how many of you play an instrument, any instrument? Anybody? Guitar?
I have one.
You have one. Well, if you're ever playing your guitar and there's an ancestor that you feel present and you want to, you can just tap it on the top and do an honor beat, and they'll always know now you're giving an honor beat in their name. That's because that's what Native Americans would do. Okay, so that's my one drum story I like to tell. Okay, so if you don't learn anything else from this workshop, go back and share with others. You know what? Only the Hollywood Indians played boom, 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 and sang "Pow Wow, the Indian boy who loved all the animals in the woods." You know, that was a cartoon. So that's very much a Hollywood idea. Da 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 da, which is an African scale applied to Native Americans, a blues scale being used for Native Americans. So you know, there's just so many misapplications of culture in media, and so I just want you to know what an honor beat was. When I come to schools, often we'll do honor poems where we will take someone in your family or someone who's a hero or a pet that you lost that you want to honor, and I generally do this with elementary kids. I'll have them bring a picture, we'll write, and how many of you have ever done a St. Quain poem? Yeah, okay, that's a whole other workshop. So, let's go to Africa, the banjo, since I have this already in my lap. Banjos came from Africa. They generally were little 3- or 4-string instruments. They had a gourd with a hide, often a groundhog or a deer hide on it. And they would use gut strings. And so the neat thing about a banjo is that it's already a chord. And so we'll do a song. This is a song from the Revolution. And as you know, there were many African Americans and European Americans and Native Americans who fought in the American Revolution for both sides, right? And so this is one of those songs that basically the American soldiers sing, "Bring it on." You know, you're going to be sorry you came. You know, like the commercial you see now with the guy standing out in the yard and it snows on him and it rains on him. Who's the actor?
Ving Rhames.
Yeah, Ving Rhames is standing out in the yard, and he tells the 2 meth heads that come up in the yard, "This is not going to end well for you. You might want to turn around and go the other way." And they do. They run again. So this was kind of the Revolutionary War version of that. Now everybody knows Yankee Doodle, but this is a less well-known song. It's called "The Rifles of Bennington." "Oh, come ye hither, red coats, your minds with madness fills. There's danger in our valleys and there's danger in our hills. Oh, hear ye not the ringing of the bugle wild and free? Full soon you'll feel the stinging of the rifle from the tree. For the rifle, for the rifle, in our hands will prove no trifle." Okay. So they're saying, you know, bring it on. You know, we're going to be hiding behind trees. We don't fight like you guys. We've learned to fight from the Native Americans. We'll be behind trees and rocks. And we'll shoot you and run and hide again, and shoot you and run and hide again. What do we call that today? Guerrilla warfare, right? We learned from the Native Americans. And so, you know, that was done in honor of the battle at Bennington. It's called the Rifles of Bennington, if you ever want to look it up. Okay, any questions about the banjo? Came from Africa. So let's go to another country. Another culture were the Scotch-Irish. We all know about the bagpipe because, you know, of Irish and Scotch pipes. And if you've ever been to a funeral where they played the pipes, Amazing Grace is often played at funerals on Irish or Scottish bagpipes. But The dulcimer was actually invented in the Appalachian Ozark Mountains, but it's tuned like a bagpipe. Here's the two drum pipes. And here's the cantor. The one that you have the holes in. And so you could build this with native wood. You could put gut strings on it, which actually were guts that were dropped behind it, so they made good strings before they had wire strings. And you could tune it like a bagpipe, and you didn't have to wait for the postman to come, think about when you're living in the remote mountains back in the days before the post office. You couldn't go online and order strings, bagpipe parts. So you could do all of this with native materials. Wood, gut, you could have friction pegs rather than modern tuners. You could use a turkey quill or a stone instead of a plastic pick. And you could tune it just like a bagpipe. And you could do all the old Scotch-Irish tunes. So the moonshiners and the people in the mountains often would make these dulcimers. There were two shapes. The hourglass shape was called the feminine form, and so it was generally used for love songs. And the fish shape was considered the religious form, and it was often used for church songs. Okay? So I'm actually going to do something that my grandmother probably would have scolded me for. I'm going to play a church song on a feminine shaped dulcimer. Okay? We didn't bring the fish shape. There's only two of us to do all of this, so we had to leave a lot of instruments behind. So the quick story on this one, it's a great story. There was an English sea captain who was on a slave ship. He made all kinds of money bringing Africans from the Gold Coast over to the Caribbean. He'd sell them into the plantations down on the islands. He would get sugar cane. He would take it up to the rum mills. The best rum in the world was made in the colonies in those days. Then he would fill the ship up. He would sell the sugar cane there for the highest price. He would fill the ship up with rum, take it back to England. English loved American rum. He would then get manufactured goods, which were the best in the world, were made in England back then. He would take those back down to Africa, where they sold for the highest price, pick up a load of slaves. He made all kinds of money at every stop. But in one particular, there's one point in history during the slave trade that has the most famous song ever written on a slave ship. Anybody know that song? Anybody know this story? Okay. Here's your next story then, like the drum. They said the waves were 30 to 40 feet tall. The ship was sinking. It was full of slaves. It was sinking, and they had no hope. But the captain told the men, if you stop doing your job, I will come club you to death. So if you fell on your knees and started praying, he was known to have clubbed a man who was praying. And so a man falls down finally. They're sinking. He knows they're going to die. A man falls on his knees to pray. Here comes Captain John Newton with his club, ready to strike the man. And as he comes up to the man, lightning strikes the mast. The men saw the lightning hop over to his club, knock the club out of his hand, and he was yelled to cry out in the middle of the storm, God have mercy. And all of the men later swore in deposition that for over a mile around the ship, the waters were calm. The storm was everywhere else, and the calm followed them. Said at the end of the journey, when they got back to England, he stepped off the ship and said, I will never step foot on one of those blank slave ships again. He went back to his home county of Ulster and became the most famous anti-slave cleric in England. And it was said that his sermons, more than 30 years later, led to the abolition of slavery in England. But while he was in his cabin after the lightning had struck, he wrote something in his captain's log. He wrote the verses of a song that he was inspired to write. Anybody know what the song was? Who knows the story?
Amazing Grace.
That's the story. John Newton, the slave captain. And that's how he wrote Amazing Grace. So, one of the favorite dulcimer songs from here. Sing it with me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. So now, as Paul Harvey, the old journalist, would say, now you know the rest of the story, right? So how many of you have heard one of the folk versions of that story, any version of that? And you heard that one at church or from your parents? Well, that was the version of the story my granny told me. So, you know, I'm not a historian, so you'll have to go check the historical fact on that. But that's the old folk story that they tell. I grew up 3 counties east of here in Booger County, Arkansas, Madison County, Arkansas, affectionately known as Booger County. And so when they were filming Where the Red Fern Grows, the video I gave you for your school, the director of the film asked me, he said, you know, he said, Dr. Farinelli, you are from this area. Can you give us a period correct song? We need at least one song from the actual period of the Red Fern. And I said, well, I sang you 3 songs that my granny had taught me as a boy. So I'm going to do those 3 songs for you. One's an outlaw song. It did not make it into the film. Let's see, I guess we could do this. I do this song on any instrument. We're talking about the fiddle. For Jesse James, could be a good fiddle too.
Good banjo.
Good fiddle or mandolin or guitar. This is a tune that has been, you know, like a lot of the old public domain tunes. American tunes come from many different places. Amazing Grace sounds a lot like an old African spiritual. And so there is a theory that maybe John Newton heard the slaves in their misery down in the hold of the ship singing this African spiritual. And that may have been where the tune for Amazing Grace comes from. We know that he wrote the words, but we're not really sure of the original place of the tune. So if you go to Wikipedia, they'll give you one version, you know. That's always what the most people think, you know, the common people who get in there and share their vast knowledge in Wikipedia. But it's not necessarily the truth, right? It's just, that's the common knowledge. It's not the scholarly knowledge. So, one of you might write a dissertation one day on the origins of Amazing Grace, where the tune really came from. The fiddle, in its present form, came from Italy. What was the name of the great violin maker that designed the modern fiddle? Anybody know? Most expensive fiddles go for over $1 million. And most of our old fiddles have his name printed inside because they're all something copies. Anybody know that one? Stradivarius, good job. Okay, see there, this is the smart group. I took their smart pills this morning. And so, if you go back though, the fiddle had many, it's one of the drum and the flute and the fiddle are like 3 of the only instruments you can find on every continent. There was even an Apache fiddle over here made. But, you know, there's an African fiddle made with a gourd and usually 1 or 2 strings. There's a Chinese fiddle. They just don't call them fiddles. But instruments that are played with a bow, okay? But this one came out of Italy and came over with many different colonists. It actually was the one instrument that came over with the Puritans, even though they thought that it was the instrument of the devil. And so there were many old stories about the devil and the fiddle, and they still write songs today about the devil. You know, Devil Went Down to Georgia, or Devil's Dream is an old fiddle tune. Paganini, we think, contributed. He didn't start the story, and it didn't start with him. But Paganini, the first millionaire musician of all time, the first superstar of Europe, he was a violin player. He was over 6 foot tall when most men were about 5'5". He had long, black, greasy hair, big, long nose, imposing looking guy, you know, long fingers, long feet, big ears. He was a gargantuan kind of looking guy. And his fingers were so long, they actually made a longer neck just for his hand on the fiddle. And he could play songs. He wrote and played songs that were so difficult that the best violinists, some of them, can't play them today. So if you ever want to listen to some great violin pieces, listen to Paganini. But there was a story that started about Paganini that he had sold his soul to the devil to be able to play impossible to play tunes. And so we know that song through many different cultures, that story through many songs of different cultures. And so probably the most famous American story about somebody selling their soul is Robert Johnson going down to the crossroads, right? And so how many of you ever heard the Eric Clapton song, Crossroads? It's a classic old rock, okay? And that's a song that was written by the great blues artist Robert Johnson. I think they even made a movie about that, about who's the Karate Kid. It's about you. Yeah, he plays a young musician going down to Mississippi trying to trace down the Robert Johnson tunes, okay? If I could get you to move just a little, we got a video going on right there. There we go, thanks, hey, that's fine. When you got a camera, it's always good knowing there's another camera. So, here is a fiddle tune. This is an old fiddle tune. It was used by Woody Guthrie to write the Ballad of Jesus Christ. But if you take it all the way back into the outlaw days, it actually was written first about the outlaw Jesse James. So here we go. You do this A. Okay, we'll do an A or D. We'll do an A. Might be a little high for my voice this morning, but we'll do it. Jesse James was a lad who killed many a man. He robbed the Glendale train. He robbed from the rich and he gave to the poor. He had a heart and a brain. For Jesse had a wife, mourned for his life. 3 children, they were brave. But that dirty little coward that shot Mr. Howard has laid poor Jesse in his grave. Has laid poor Jesse in his grave. Jesse James. So, any Woody Guthrie fans? Any of y'all go to the Woody Guthrie Festival? Well, listen for that tune. Woody liked to borrow tunes, like a lot of the old songwriters. Borrowed lots of those old public domain tunes, and he rewrote that. If you listen to the Ballad of Jesus Christ, that's Jesse James, the tune from Jesse James. If you listen to the Battle of Tom Joad, which he uses a story from John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, and tells it in a song form, the Ballad of Tom Joad. That's another old cowboy outlaw song that he borrowed the tune from, called John Hardy. So, you know, a lot of cross-cultural borrowing back in those days. People borrowed each other's tunes a lot. And so a lot of those tunes, we don't even know where they came from. How are we doing time-wise, guys? 1 o'clock. Okay, so we're halfway through, so I should be to the Civil War by now. You guys know? Okay, better speed it up. Well, let's talk about the Germans. Since the Germans were very important fighters in both the Revolution and the Civil War. The German troops out of Pennsylvania and Ohio were all the Germans settled. And they brought with them reed instruments. They brought